All right, hello, my name is Andres. Today we're going to be going over how to make a handheld camera obscura. So if you've gone over it with your instructor yet or gone through any of your lectures, you will have seen some information about a room or an object called a camera obscura. So this is kind of a new modern version, right? Something that can be made handheld, and we can see some pretty cool projections of really bright spaces. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. So the first thing we're going to go over is the tools. All right, so the tools, the first thing you're going to need is a pencil. The pencil we're just going to use just to make some simple marks. Next, we've got a ruler. I like to use a transparent ruler. If you don't have a transparent ruler, that's okay. Just make sure it's a ruler you trust. You need to be as exact as possible here. We are making two cylinders that fit within each other, and the more exact you are, the better they will fit inside of each other. Next, we've got a cutting tool, so you can use an X-Acto or a pair of scissors. Either works just fine. Next, we've got two different kinds of tape. First, we've got blue painter's tape here. This is going to be what we use to kind of finish off our seams and also put our caps onto each of our cylinders. Next, we've also got this double-sided tape. This is a bit of a fancier double-sided tape. You don't have to use this tape if you don't want to. You can use just the regular Scotch brand if you've got it. This will just help start your seams. It's not going to be the be-all, end-all, though, because you do need something light type, which is where the blue painter's tape comes in. Next, we've got our push pin. You can also use a needle here if you've got like a sewing needle, but you just need something that's like as pointy and cylindrical or kind of tube-like as possible because you want a very small aperture in your camera so that you can, see a sharp image. Next, we've got our self-healing cutting mat. This is a tool that you use at home if you don't have like a surface to work on that you don't care about. If you have like a desk that's like a family heirloom or something, or just a surface you want to protect, this protects that surface. Next, we've got our two pieces of construction paper. I want to stress using construction paper in this situation. Artist paper just kind of folds and uh, rather than bends the way we need this paper to, because we will be making small two cylinders and we need them to be bent rather than folded. If you fold the paper, it's just not going to work as well. For here, I've got tracing paper. And finally, we've got our aluminum foil. So this is again is a little bit bigger than we need. Out of each of this, like the caps that we're making, they're both just going to be cut into smaller squares. We're going to start with our two pieces of construction paper we've got here. So we're going to go ahead and, before we mark them, we are going to go ahead and actually label them so that we know which one is which. So you're going to need to know that in the future because each of these cylinders sits within the other and you want them to fit as best as possible. And if you get them wrong, you'll know very quickly. So we're going to go ahead and mark our first sheet of paper here. So piece number one, the first cylinder, the outside cylinder, we're going to be measuring 1.25 inches in from the edge. So we're going to mark it at multiple points so that we get as exact a line as possible, because after we make each of these marks, we're going to make one long line along those marks that we make, all at a 1.25 inches so that you have a nice and straight line. So on piece number two, we're pretty much repeating the same step, just rather than measuring 1.25 inches, we're measuring 1.5. Again, we need them to be as exact as possible, so we're making multiple marks on the piece of paper so that we get the best possible fit with the two cylinders. So the reason we make multiple marks here rather than using uh, just making one mark and then making one line is that you want it to be as straight as possible, because if there's like any misalignment, things might not fit well, and you want them to fit as best you can. So we've got number 1, number 2. So we're going to just go ahead and focus on number 1 first. So we're going to set number 2 aside. So number 1, we're going to take some double-sided tape, and we're just going ahead and cut some strips here. Like 2 to 3 inches long is fine. This tape is particularly thick. The Scotch brand tape is a lot thinner. It's totally okay though, as long as it sits right up against that edge. That's all that matters. Always close up your blade if you're not using it, or put a cap on it, just to keep yourself safe. So piece number 1, we're going to kind of want to evenly space them. So I'll kind of put one like further down and one further up. We just want to keep them nice and taut and make sure that everything lays nice and flat, so everything we get the most out of it. So I'm just going to take this backing off. This back tape is really nice. It works very well. The Scotch brand double-sided tape is not backed, so it is a little bit more difficult to work with. So just be wary and don't let yourself get too frustrated with the double-sided tape. So now we're just going to fold this over, and we're going to take that edge of the non-tape side over, and we're going to take it right up to that line that we've drawn and try to get that nice and stuck on there. So you just smooth out those where the tape is, and then you take your blue painter's tape and you take a big strip that's a little bit longer than the length of your first cylinder, and you're just going to kind of let some excess hang off over each side. The reason you want that to hang off that way is so that you can kind of just fold it over or cut it. I do like to fold it over, but sometimes it does make the cylinders a little too snug, so kind of use your discretion on that. If you're like being really exact and meticulous, you might want to just cut the tape rather than fold it over. So next we're going to focus on the cap for this first cylinder. I've cut this aluminum foil already a little bit. I'm just going to cut it a little bit closer into a square. It is kind of difficult to cut. My blade was a little dull here, as you can see. It doesn't have to be a perfect square. It just needs to be square shaped. So now that I'm kind of just checking to make sure it fits well. Now I'm just going to flip, just take the foil and put it right on top, and you can kind of just like fold it over. It's not going to like be beautiful. So we're just going to use some tape to adhere it. This will hold quite well, but you want it to be as light tight as possible, so I do like to add a bit of tape on the end as well, just to make sure that it's staying and sticking. So here, you'll see I can flip it over, and it won't fall off, but if you're like going to take it outside or be in any weather or walking anywhere, it might fall off. So it's always better just to use a bit of tape here. So there we go, cylinder number 1 with its cap on. Again, the cap is going to provide our like blackout for the cylinder, for the camera itself. We're going to poke a pinhole in this later. We're going to set that aside for now and make our second cylinder. So here we got sheet number 2 already measured up. I'm just going to cut some tape really quick, cut that out so you don't have to watch me cut tape. So here we go, piece number 1 and 2, again evenly spaced. Same steps as before, just a little bit different measurement. Just try to keep everything right up against that line. It really will help a lot when you fit them together. So if you stick at all, it will get messed up. As you see here, I'm sticking, and it wasn't perfectly aligned, so it doesn't stick as well. That's why we have that backup blue tape, not only to block it out, but also to just make sure that it's nice and covered as well as it can be. All right, so we're going to take our blue tape again, just a little over the edge on each side. I kind of go overboard a little bit here. So always smooth it out. Don't let it be bumpy or anything like that. It's going to make it more difficult to work with in the on the later half. So it's on there. Next, we'll take our tracing paper. So this is an 8x10 piece. So I'm just going to cut this into a kind of square-ish shape, which eventually I will cut into a circle. So you'll see me, the reason I'm making a square first is that it's easier to make a circle out of a square because you can kind of just cut the corners off. So be very careful with your knife here. If you're using a knife, if you're using scissors, you'll be much safer doing this. Just be as careful as you can, and remember to close your blade. So just make sure you're making those corners, just cutting off those corners well. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, but just something resembling a circle that will fit. So now we're going to take the cylinder and sit it right on top of the parchment. What's going to happen here is we're going to make a quick little tracing of the cylinder right onto the parchment so that we have the general shape of the cylinder that will be sitting in it. The reason we're doing this is we're actually going to make some what are called sunburst cuts. So it's going to eventually resemble a sun. So I'm just going to make some kind of mostly, I would say about 1 inch sized lines that kind of radiate away from the trace circle that we've made. And after we've made these lines, we're going to go ahead and cut along those lines. So I'll usually go about 1/4 inch from the edge of the tracing of the cylinder so that you have some overhang. Be sure that it leaves some overhang so that no light gets through and leaks out of the projection when it's being made on your camera. As you can see here, it resembles the kind of the rays of a sun, as though if you were to draw them when you were younger or as a kid, or if you were to draw it on a piece of paper. So the reason we're doing that is they act as like petals almost that we can fold over onto this. So I always like to fold, or rather tape the opposite edges. So if I tape one side, then I'm going to tape the opposing side away from it so that it's nice and taut and held down. So as we do that, we're going to kind of go in a crisscross pattern. So after I've done these two first sides, I'll turn it slightly and then do a cross pattern as you see here. So I'll tape these other two ends and then shift it over. And we'll do that until we've covered all of these pieces. So now that we've finished this up, we can kind of take a look at it. You can see it's not beautiful, and it's not really gonna fit well inside of the other cylinder. It might snag. There's a lot of pieces that are hanging off. So we'll take another long strip of tape, like we did for the other cap, and just kind of give it like a bit of a collar, and also kind of just smooth out those rougher edges that occurred when we folded those tabs over. So now that we've done that, these two cylinders are what you've got. So the cylinder with the foil, cylinder number one, is going to get a pinhole in the end. Do not put a pinhole in in cylinder number two with the parchment cap. You want that to be nice and flat so that you get an image on there. So now once once you've done that, you can go ahead and start to try to fit them together. So you kind of want to squeeze them so that they can kind of make like a similar shape to each other, and slowly just coax them inside of one another. This is a little bit difficult, and don't let yourself get too frustrated with it. It will eventually fit. You kind of have to just fit it in there and kind of give it a bit of range of motion so that it can really fit well. Pushing it all the way up in as well flattens out that aluminum foil cap, so you've kind of got a flatter cap as well. So that's pretty much it. That's our camera Obscura. Now some examples of images seen through the camera captured on an iPhone. Really, any smartphone works for this process. As long as you take your time and are patient with it, you'll get something out of it. The main thing you have to do is hold your camera up to the camera Obscura itself and make sure that you are covering the rest of the opening with your hand in some way, whether it's with a towel to really darken it or just covering with your hand by itself. You're going to get some pretty interesting images as long as you do two main things. One is to point the camera at a light, bright scene and move the interior cylinder forward so that it can focus and get a clearer image. This focus works just like a real camera. You need to correct it so that it's in focus and you can actually see what you're looking at.